All right. Well, let us invoke the divine presence. May the divine presence be with us, illumine us, share with us its glory and brilliance of mind, as it does in this book, Love Poems from God. Well, Rochelle, you're in the top left corner here. Would you like to read a wedding gift?
Sure. Let me.
It's on page 44.
Page 44. A wedding gift. Just 1 second, brother. Okay. A wedding gift. I hear you singing, dear, inviting me to your limb. I am coming, for all that we do is a preparation for love. I hear you singing, my lord, inviting me to your throne. We are coming, dear, for all the toil you have blessed us with is a preparation to know and hold the sacred. I hear you singing, my soul, but how can it be that God's voice has now become my own? That is just a wedding gift for our divine union, my beloved self. Okay, I just need a second here because
Please. Yeah.
it's pretty hard to read something like that. And okay, a wedding gift. I hear you singing, dear, inviting me to your limb. I am coming, for all that we do is a preparation for love. I hear you singing, my lord, inviting me to your throne. We are coming, dear, for all the toil you have blessed us with is a preparation to know and hold the sacred. I hear you singing, my soul, but how can it be that God's voice has now become my own? That is just a wedding gift for our divine union, my beloved self.
Good evening, Jillian. We just read a wedding gift on page 44. Yes.
This is not ginger we're out, but it's that stomach ease and it has ginger in it.
Okay.
So
thank you.
that was the closest thing we can do.
Okay.
This should be
So it's interesting that the opening stanza says, inviting me to your limb, like two birds on a limb. And that's how it seems to me. Does it seem different to anyone else? Anyone else hear limb differently? I hear you singing, dear, inviting me to your limb. And then
I think the bird. I think the bird because he's singing and
yeah,
inviting him to the limb and
right.
and why not? You know,
Right.
be a bird.
Well, the bird is a
metaphor.
Well, a metaphor, and it's also something that is a reality for these people. The divine in these what seem to us to be limited forms, but not to these saints. So, and so it says, "I'm coming. For all we do is a preparation for love." And then I hear you singing, my Lord, inviting me to your throne. And then now that the throne is, of course, the king.
Mm-hmm.
We are coming for all the toil. The king blesses us with toil. All the toil you have blessed us with is a preparation to know and hold the sacred. Anybody else have any other thoughts about this poem?
Brother Shankara, this is Michaeli.
Yes, Michaela.
On where it says, we are coming, dear, for all the toil you have blessed us with. So on the word toil there, to me, I thought toil kind of that would mean like your karma in a way, because toil that you have blessed us with. So maybe your lessons.
Well, that definitely is a good reading of it. Toil is, and Krishna speaks about it in the Gita that way, that the toil that we're given is our karma, yes. And that then aligns very much with a preparation to know and hold the sacred. So the lessons, very well thought, very well said.
Thank you.
I hear you singing, my soul, but how can it be that God's voice has become my own, has now become my own? And this is, we hear over and over from these saints, that, and this is Saint Francis of Assisi saying that he no longer has a voice of his own. His voice has become the Lord's voice. And that's how people related to him, according to stories that are written about him and passed down to us. And so that's the wedding gift that is in the title. The fact that it's a preparation for the consummation of a marriage in divine union. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, I also see the that preparation, as you say, Shankara, as the poem goes along. At the beginning, I hear you singing dear, okay? And then I hear you singing my Lord, and then I hear you singing my soul. It's like the evolution of your soul in preparation for transcending, or, you know.
Very,
perhaps.
very nicely read and heard, yes. That's good. Yes, it is an evolution. From the dualistic of dear to the less dualistic of myself and the Lord, to the union, to the non-dual of the divine union. Very nicely heard.
And of course, the first stanza, the singing of, like the analogy of the bird singing on the limb, of course, that is all St. Francis, you know,
Yeah.
with the birds and the animals. That's just so him.
Yeah, and there's two birds on the limb.
Yeah.
Then at the end, there's going to be only one. There already is only one voice. And then there's going to be only that. Oh, very nicely read, Heidi. Anything else from anyone? Michele, do you have the book there?
Yes, I do.
Okay, would you like to read Our Need for Thee?
Sure.
This is a long one.
That's okay. Our need for thee. In our ever-present need for thee, beloved, let us know your peace. Let us be your instruments that break every shackle. For do not the caged ones weep. And give us our inheritance of divine love, so that we can forgive like you. And let us be wise, so that we do not wed another's madness and then make them in debt to us for the deep gash their helpless raging lance will cause. Darkness is an unlit wick. It just needs your touch, beloved, to become a sacred flame. And what sadness in this world could endure if it looked into your eyes? God is like a honeybee. He doesn't mind me calling him that. For when you are kind, sweet, he nears and can draw you into himself. What is there to understand of each other? If a wand turned the sun into a moon, would not the moon mourn the ecstatic effluence it once was? We are all in mourning for the experience of our essence we knew and now miss. Light is the cure, all else is a placebo. Yes, I will console my creature before me that is not laughing or full of passion for their art or life. For laughing and passion, beauty and joy is our heart's truth. All else is labor and foreign to the soul. I have stood in his reign and now fill
Granaries.
granaries as do the fertile plains. Giving is as natural to love as sound from the mouth. There is a courageous dying. It is called effacement. That holy death unfurls our spirit's wings and allows us to embrace God even as we stand on the earth.
Okay, could you read it again from the beginning? And that word that you came across, it's effulgence. Effulgence. It means shining brilliance.
Okay, all right, thank you. Our need for thee. In our ever-present need for thee, beloved, let us know your peace. Let us be your instruments that break every shackle. For do not the caged ones weep. And give us our inheritance of divine love so that we can forgive like you. And let us be wise so that we do not wed another's madness and then make them in debt to us for the deep gash their helpless raging lance will cause. Darkness is an unlit wick. It just needs your touch, beloved, to become a sacred flame. And what sadness in this world could endure if it looked into your eyes? God is like a honeybee. He doesn't mind me calling him that. For when you are kind, sweet, he nears and can draw you into himself. What is there to understand of each other? If a wand turned the sun into a moon, would not the moon mourn the ecstatic
Effulgent.
effulgence it once was? We are all in mourning for the experience of our essence we knew and now miss. Light is the cure, all else is a placebo. Yes, I will console any creature before me that is not laughing or full of passion for their art or life. For laughing and passion, beauty and joy is our heart's truth. All else is labor and foreign to the soul. I have stood in his reign and now fill
Granaries.
granaries as do the fertile plains. Giving is as natural to love as sound from the mouth. There is a courageous dying. It is called effacement. That holy death unfurls our spirit's wings and allows us to embrace God even as we stand on the earth.
Well, this is a real sermon, isn't it? I mean, this is a homily. So much here.
It sounds like a poem of Rumi. I don't know why, but it does. And
It has that same It has that same awakened brilliance. You're right. It does sound like something that Rumi might have written. And, two very different people from very different traditions, very different parts of the world, and yet, as the Vedas say, as the Rig Veda says, sages called one truth by many names.
Rumi liked to, I think, he liked to talk to God in the poem and tell him how wonderful he was and all of the
Yes.
miraculous things he could do, like lighting the wick. And it's just it's a love poem, but it's very serious and very sober. Yeah.
There's some very deep instruction here. Anyone want to tell us anything that particularly struck their heart or mind?
Mamaji, this is McKaylee.
Yes.
What struck me is where light is the cure and all else is a placebo.
Yes.
The placebo. I like that. So it's people take pills and they think your mind is so strong. They think it's something else. And yet it's not. And they have the same effect as if it was because of the mind. So to me, it's saying placebo would be this, they think this reality is real. That's how deep I took what.
Right.
This reality is the placebo.
And he ends by saying, we can do this divine union, which is in the previous poem. We can embrace God while still alive and standing on this earth, which, this is one of the things that got Assisi and these other mystic saints of the Catholic Church in trouble, because, salvation and triumph over death. But notice he prefaces it by saying there's a different kind of death. You can die before you die, as Muhammad put it. There's so much here.
Shankar, I think it's interesting. I like that you categorized it as a homily, because he starts actually with a prayer.
Yes.
Right? Give us our inheritance of divine love, and let us be wise. So that first little section, those first two stanzas are very much prayers to God. And then he moves into darkness is an unlit wick, it just needs your touch. So he's still talking to God. And I love that idea. Who was it? Ramakrishna, who talks about, that light, the thing about darkness is just on the tip of my tongue here. That darkness is the absence of light. It's not something of itself.
Exactly. And he says, though a room be dark 1,000 years, if you strike a match in that room, does the dark vanish little by little?
No, it's instantaneous. Right. That's what that reminded me of.
Yes.
The sacred flame. And then he kind of shifts to talking to his audience, his readers, his congregation. God is like a honeybee. And I like kind of the structure of, and then when he says, yes, I will console any creature, is he talking about himself, St. Francis, or is he taking God's voice there?
Well, I think they have become one, as it says in the prior poem.
Okay.
I think that's a very good insight, that he's no longer, and there's so And let us be wise, so that we do not wed another's madness, and then make them in debt to us for the deep gash their helpless raging lance will cause.
Mhm.
Notice, no judgment
Mhm.
of what they're doing. Helpless.
Mhm. Wow.
But let us not wed their madness, so that so that so that their karma becomes that they owe us, so to speak,
Mhm.
or owe the Lord. There's just needs your touch, beloved, to become a sacred flame, to become a sacred flame.
Yeah, and then I like God is like a honeybee. He doesn't mind me calling him that. I mean, I just love how these poets speak of God that way, or the divine,
Mhm.
God in this case. He doesn't mind me calling him a honeybee. For when you are kind and sweet, he nears and can draw you into himself.
And I agree with you, Heidi, all the way. They just see God in everything. They don't. Nothing is excluded.
Yeah, I just love how they speak about him that way. That just really
Right.
Mhm.
continues to touch me in these poems.
Mm.
Time after time. But yeah.
And then this very profound little piece in the middle of the poem. What is there to understand of each other? What is there to understand of each other? If a wand turned the sun into a moon, would not the moon mourn the ecstatic effulgence it once was? In other words, we're all reflecting that divine radiance. This is what we need to understand of one another. What is there to understand? We're each and every one like the moon, reflecting that ecstatic effulgence.
And the next sentence, Shankara, I love. Thank you for that, because now this is making more sense to me. We are all in mourning for the experience of our essence we knew and now miss. So he's referring to our soul being before we take on this earthly guise,
Yes,
right?
exactly. That's
Which
how I hear it too. And which we return to.
right.
Light is the cure. And as Michele pointed out, all else is a placebo.
Mhm.
It may produce a temporary effect, but it's not the real thing. And then, this is Saint Francis all the way. Yes, I will console any creature before me that is not laughing or full of passion for their art or life. I mean, once again, this is what gets these saints in troubles with the church, because you're supposed to be humble, not laughing and full of passion for your art and life. For laughing and passion, beauty and joy is our heart's truth, and all else is labor and foreign to the soul. That's my favorite section of this poem. Yes, I will console any creature before me. This is now, Saint Francis speaking with God's voice. I will console any creature before me that is not laughing or full of passion for their art or life. For laughing and passion, beauty and joy is our heart's truth. all else is labor and foreign to the soul, which is a parallel statement to the business about the placebo.
I once read this is Rochelle, brother, and
Yeah.
I once read I don't remember what text it was, but I remember this very, very clearly. And it said, for the end of spirituality is not holiness, it's freedom. And
Mm.
I have to remember that sometimes.
Well, you know, we get all tied up in this piety business
Yeah.
of being good people. You know,
Mhm.
if we are truly free, we will not do any harm because we will respect the freedom in others. We will see that our freedom is their freedom, that it is freedom. I really thank you, Rochelle. That is right on the money.
Welcome. I have to remember that sometimes.
Well, we all do. We all do. We all get, you know, because there's that
Oh, yeah.
accuser, there's that accuser voice in us.
Mhm.
You know, like I just got a note from someone. I sent them these songs that I'd written, and I got a note back saying, "Oh, you know, these are wonderful, and it speaks to me. Particularly the one, the song to you, because she said, I'm just having trouble because I find that I have to justify myself, not to others, but to herself, that accuser voice, for enjoying such things as feeding the birds and shelving books as a volunteer at the local library, when her friends are so concerned with all of the causes and terrible things going on the planet. And as she points out, that they can do nothing about. You know,
Nothing.
we can feed the birds. We can shelve the books at the library as a volunteer. Those are things we can do, solving little problems.
Yeah, we can enjoy a piece of avant-garde performance art, and yeah, I'm not solving the world's problems, but I can enjoy the art, and perhaps the art is rebellion in itself towards
Well,
the like world. So
they're art and full of passion. I don't think I've ever seen a performance artist that wasn't full of passion.
Mhm.
So much here in this poem. All else is labor and foreign to the soul. And don't we all know that one well? And then this beautiful image that he uses more than once in these poems. I have stood in his reign and now fill granaries as do the fertile plains. In other words, he's just giving like the great fields give, and granaries, of course, are where grain is stored. What's grain for? Grain is to provide sustenance, to make bread. I have stood in his reign and now fill granaries as do the fertile fields. Giving is as natural to love as sound from the mouth. And you know, is this holiness? No, it's sacredness.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. I
I
love
have
that.
stood in. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have stood in his reign, and now fill granaries, as do the fertile plains. Like they are also in the rain. So he was made Evokant. He was made abundant by the rain that he stood in, and now is filling the granaries. And
Yes.
yeah,
And he says it's completely natural.
yeah.
And giving is as natural to love as sound from the mouth.
I
And
love that line. That's such a beautiful line, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
is,
I really, really like that.
yes.
It's a beautiful line. And you know what that reminds me of too is you sometimes read, or I sometimes read, that love is not a feeling, love is an action. To just like feel that you love that love is a verb.
Yes.
And I think he's really relating to this now to show love, that the true love naturally brings us to a place of giving to ourselves and others. I think this would include.
And he calls this giving, the next lines, he gives this giving as a courageous dying.
Uh-huh.
There is a courageous dying. It is called effacement. In other words, it's no longer about me. It's about us. It's about giving, as the fertile plains give grain and they're put in the granaries and distributed. That holy death, he says, when you live that way, that holy death unfurls our spirit's wings and allows us to embrace God, even as we stand on the earth, which of course is the transcendent experience of spiritual self-realization.
And
And
it's like, sorry.
go ahead, please.
It's like St. Paul said, I die daily. And that's that, you just drop the humanhood, day by day as you recognize it. And humility, this effacement, this humility comes. And that's that holy death that allows us to, this is my take, that allows us to embrace God even as we're still alive in the body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's
And if we remember about St. Paul, St. Paul was somebody who was persecuting Jesus's followers, and Jesus pulled him up short
mm-hmm.
and embraced him and said, "No, you're going to be mine from now on." And so you can imagine that St. Paul, when he says, "I die daily," I wake up, Saul of Tarsus, but then I then see, I follow the instructions. I am what I now am, and become Paul. And because he asks when he's pulled up short, he's flat on the ground. He doesn't understand what's happened to him or who is talking to him. And Jesus says, "Well, it's me." and
Uh-huh.
and Paul says, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" Actually, still Saul. Saul says, "What am I supposed to do?" And Jesus says, "Well, just go on to Damascus, and I'll tell you." And it's at that point that he is transformed, when he's given the instructions, and then is embraced by God, even as he stood on this earth, and became this great saint and martyr. So anything else about this remarkable song, this homily? It's one that you can read over and over and over
Uh-huh.
and continue to get more out of. I mean, there's so much here. Anything else before we go on to the next one? Okay, Heidi, would you like to read Does Every Creature Have a Soul?
I'd be happy to. Does every creature have a soul? A tool in your hand I am, dear God, the sweetest instrument you have shaped my being into. What makes me now complete? Feeling the soul of every creature against my heart. Does every creature have a soul? Surely they do, for anything God has touched will have life forever, and all creatures he has held.
Wow.
Does every creature have a soul? A tool in your hand I am, dear God, the sweetest instrument you have shaped my being into. What makes me now complete? Feeling the soul of every creature against my heart. Does every creature have a soul? Surely they do, for anything God has touched, we have life forever, and all creatures he has held.
Doesn't that say will have life forever, Heidi?
Yes, I'm sorry, surely they do, for anything God has touched will have life forever, and all creatures he has held. Sorry.
No need to be sorry.
Well, thanks for correcting that.
I didn't want to just let it go. So, here, there's this great homily. And then he says, once we stand embraced by God on the earth, what do we become? A tool in your hand, dear Lord. The sweetest instrument you have shaped me into, my being into. And then he says, he says, I am complete. But then he says, what makes me now complete? Having been embraced and embracing the Lord, having become one with the Lord, the divine union of a couple of poems back. What makes me now complete? Feeling the soul of every creature against my heart. This is why all those creatures flocked to him. Why the flower whistled at him in the fields.
And he talked to the squirrels, right?
Oh, did he ever? Oh, we'll come to that poem.
Right.
Where he talks to his old friend the squirrel about the sacraments. It's
And can't you just feel him, like, maybe not physically or otherwise, embracing every creature against his heart? Can you just
Oh, yes.
Can you
Yes.
just see that in your mind's eye and feel what that feels like, that energy? It's just
Yes.
pretty powerful stuff, I think.
Yes, idea. How beautifully and simply put. Pretty powerful stuff. Yes, indeed. It is powerful stuff. And that is, the great nectar that flows from this book is this powerful stuff spoken of. And then he just says, does every creature have a soul? Which, of course, was a matter of great debate among the scholastics in the Catholic Church. The scholastics were a big deal. Thomas Aquinas was one of them, and so on. Does every creature have a soul? Surely they do. For anything that God has touched will have life forever. And all creatures he has held. Otherwise, how would they come to be? So, again, the through line of these poems becomes so evident. But so he's He says, you've shaped me, having embraced me, having this embrace in which I entered you. Your voice became mine. What makes me now complete? Feeling the soul of every creature. Against my heart.
Mm.
Anything else from anyone?
That line is so powerful that when I get to the end of the poem and it says, and all creatures he has held, that same image of God literally holding creatures close to his heart is kind of resonates in, even though that last line is less kind of obviously poetic, it just seems to resonate back with that beautiful image.
Yeah.
I agree, Cillian. I think that's the most powerful line, and I just not saying anything because I don't have any words for this poem. It's just so it is so beautiful, and it's
It is
so
beautiful.
universal truth in there is just in every line, you know.
Well, Jillian, would you read the next one, please?
Yes. Wild forces. There are beautiful wild forces within us. Let them turn the mills inside and fill sacks that feed even heaven. Wild forces. There are beautiful wild forces within us. Let them turn the mills inside and fill sacks that feed even heaven.
This is one of the things that we're told, that our lives nurture the angels. That, and this is why we are to offer everything, so that they can partake of it before we partake of it.
And I love that he calls them wild. You know, there's so much in the Christian faith I grew up with that kind of wanted us to be meek.
Oh, yes.
Meek and lamb-like and sweet and just kind of gently following along.
Well,
and
yeah.
So I love that, you know, honoring the wild forces and making them as sacred.
Oh, yes.
I love that.
Because it just tracks directly from the poem before. God created all of this. He has held all of it. And so these wild forces, and again, this is the St. Francis that, you know, troubled the church. He was never brought before the Inquisition because he was in his personal life quite careful and quite strict with himself. So it was hard for them to find fault with him. It's interesting. At the end of his life, St. Francis was asked, well, Master, if there's anything you could have done differently or would have done differently, what might that be? And he thought about it a few moments and then said, well, I think I would have been kinder to Brother Ass, that being his body, as he called his body, Brother Ass. And but yes, there are beautiful wild forces within us. We all feel them. Let them turn the mills inside and fill sacks that feed even heaven. And this tracks right back to the granaries. You know, we have the granaries full. Now what? Now the granaries that the generosity has provided. Now let them mills, these, forces. I mean, what do they do to in his day? What did they do to turn the mills? They put a mill on a wild river so that the water was running hard and fast,
Mm.
and turned that, because they had to have these great heavy stones, and the water wheels, this was all so very new, in those days. And the used to be grinding grain was by hand, and then these mills were invented. And in Holland, of course, they were turned by the wind, those great huge wind machines that they created. In places like Italy, where there were these raging, roaring rivers, they put the mills on that, and then diverted that fast running water, and created a mechanism that would, these water wheels that would turn these giant stones and grain and grind the grain, mill the grain, and fill sacks that feed even heaven.
Mm.
Yes, indeed. Anything else from anyone about this lovely short little poem?
Brother Shankara, this is McKaylee.
Yes, Michaeli.
I took it that as towards concentration and the mind, and you could say the mind would be the mill.
Mm-hmm.
Do your
Mm.
mantra, you can have more control of the thoughts, the wild, raging thoughts, the more you sit in meditation.
Mm.
Ah,
Mm.
yes. Oh, how beautifully, what a good turn you've given this, Michaeli. That's great.
Mm.
Yes.
Well, I just know, like with the internet and YouTube, I had a wonderful experience the other day, and I usually, before I go to bed, I'll watch something from Vedanta Society or a class from you, something, or I'll read a book, the Gospel of Ramakrishna, something uplifting.
That's a good thing to do for sure.
Well, it was a blessing because it showed me how the mind is like clay, and so it goes with this wild forces. I was watching, I saw something about I live in Arizona, so I saw something about some police activity in Phoenix, and I started watching that, and then I got more entrapped in other things, and my ego had taken over with watching this crime. And right before my alarm went off, it actually woke me up. I was dreaming that someone had broken into my house, but it wasn't a house that I'd ever seen before. And they had stolen my debit card and things like that. And so I realized that it was a dream, it wasn't true, and that my mind was creating a reality from what I had put into it, that I was to keep the bowl empty. And so I took it as a blessing, and I gave thanks that I had experienced that, because I said, from now on, I'm going to keep my mind only on positive spiritual things, not this, not that, because you really program, it affects, and then it can create your reality. And so
Yes,
it goes with the wild forces.
when we get to Aquinas, he has a poem about that. He says, if you dreamed that someone had broken into your house and stolen something, and you woke up and found it wasn't true, would you remain upset? No. You'd simply say, "Oh, how what wild forces are in my mind that create such things. Anyway, it's a gorgeous poem, and that's just one of the thoughts that's in it. It's one of his homily poems.
Mm.
Oh, this is so sweet. You want to read this one, Michelle, this next one?
Yes, let's see here. Wring out my clothes. Such love does the sky now pour, that whenever I stand in the field, I have to wring out the light when I get home.
No.
He's so sweet. Wring out my clothes. Such love does the sky now pour, that whenever I stand in the field, I have to wring out the light when I get home.
Mm.
In other words, he becomes ecstatic. The
Mhm.
light just fills him. You know, does the sky now pour? Such love does the sky now pour, that when I stand in a field, I have to wring out the light when I get home. In other words, to do anything that needs to be done at home, he has to come. This is how I'm hearing it anyway. He has to wring that ecstasy out of himself.
Mhm.
And we hear this from
Yeah, I feel that St. Francis had become, had completely become one with nature, and by extension with God, but went beyond nature into God. And nature was his reference for everything, like a hermit that lived, in the mountain. But he was able to express this, unlike maybe other hermits, and bring this to us. But I think nature was his touchstone.
I think you're absolutely right. If we remember the short biography that Ladinsky put in the beginning, after he decided that being a medieval knight was not his life path, he began to spend long periods of time alone in nature. And it was in that little chapel that was, it was out in some natural wild place. It was all dilapidated, but he'd gone in the chapel, and the figure of Christ on the cross came alive and said, "Francis, my house has come to ruin here. Fix it up for me." And that's how St. Francis, the Ladinsky doesn't go on to say so, but the story is that that's how St. Francis started the order that he founded. Was he gathered together a group of men. In those days, it was that kind of thing was the occupation of men. And so he gathered these guys together, and at some point they decided, well, let's stay together. And so the idea was conceived that they would become an order of monks. And that's when St. Francis went to Rome with the petition that there are a dozen of us, and the story goes that he came and he went to the Vatican. This was the first time he'd gone. And when he got there, the gatekeeper said, "Who are you? Nobody knows you. Go away." And so he didn't go away. He stayed and prayed, of course. And the Pope then had a vision that there's somebody waiting to see you. And you are to grant his petition. And so the Pope said to his gatekeepers, "Who is this that wants to see me and offer a petition?" And so they led St. Francis to him. And so then the Pope authorized the founding of the Franciscan order. That's the rest of that story about Christ coming alive on the crucifix. And saying to St. Francis, repair my house, which, of course, St. Francis did indeed repair Catholicism by the founding of the Franciscans. They were so pure. And there was so much corruption. And where there wasn't corruption, there was intellectualism, scholasticism. And so, repair my house was a bigger charge than simply fix up that little church. Anything else from anyone about this or anything else that we've read tonight? All right, my dears. May we all be safe. May we all be healthy. May we all be cheerful. May we all have peace of mind. And may we all go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga Durga Durga. A very sweet good night to you.
Good night to you, Shankara, and to everybody.
Any
Yeah,
final-
thank you,
Better,
Shankara.
brother.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
See you next week.
good night, good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.